At 6:12 on a Tuesday morning, my next-door neighbor called to ask whether I was dead. I told him I was fairly certain I wasn't. Then he sent me the link. The headline on the Ridgeway Chronicle website read: Samuel Whitaker, longtime publisher and voice of Ridgeway, dies at 74. There was a photograph of me beneath it. Not an old photograph. Not some grainy picture from the archives. It was the portrait my son had asked me to take 3 months earlier because, according to him, the paper needed updated photographs of senior leadership. I was standing in my kitchen in slippers, reading my own obituary on a newspaper my family had owned for 83 years. The first half was almost flattering. It talked about my 47 years at the Chronicle. The flood coverage in 1993. The courthouse corruption series. The winter our presses ran for 6 straight days because every road into town was closed and people relied on us for information. It mentioned my late wife, Eleanor. It mentioned my son, Grant. My daughter, Leah. My 2 grandchildren. Then I reached the final 3 lines. In the final year of his life, Whitaker completed the transfer of the Chronicle to the next generation. His son, Grant Whitaker, now holds controlling authority over Whitaker Publishing. A new ownership partnership will be announced today. I read those lines 3 times. Then I called my son. He rejected the call. I called again. Rejected. On the 3rd attempt, Grant answered. He didn't say hello. He said, "Dad, I can explain." Am I dead? What? Your newspaper says I am. Our newspaper. There was a pause. It was a publishing error. Then explain the last paragraph. Another pause. Longer this time. Come to the office. I am asking you what ownership partnership is being announced today. Grant exhaled. Crescent Regional Media. I knew the name. Everyone in local journalism knew the name. They own 26 newspapers across 5 states. They bought family publications, combined operations, sold buildings, reduced printing schedules and called the result modernization. What does Crescent have to do with my newspaper? Grant answered quietly. They're buying it. I gripped the kitchen counter. No. Dad. No. You cannot sell the Chronicle. The agreement is already signed. I remember looking at the obituary again. For 74 years, I had assumed there were many things a man might learn from his own obituary. I never imagined one of them would be that his son had sold the family newspaper before he was dead enough to stop him. My name is Samuel Whitaker. By 8 o'clock that morning, half the town thought I had died. By noon, I would discover my son had agreed to sell the Chronicle for $14.6 million. By Friday, 19 of our employees would learn their jobs were expected to disappear. And before the week was over, my daughter would force me to admit that Grant was not the first Whitaker who had decided saving a newspaper justified lying to the people who trusted him. The obituary was removed 9 minutes after Grant and I hung up. That was plenty of time. Ridgeway had a population of 41,000 people and apparently 39,000 of them knew how to take a screenshot. My phone filled with condolences, confusion, jokes and one message from a retired judge saying, "If you're alive, call me. If you're dead, this can wait." I did not respond. I put on a suit and drove downtown. The Chronicle occupied a 3-story brick building on Madison Street. My grandfather had purchased it in 1943 when the paper was 4 pages long and the printing press occupied more floor space than the newsroom. The building still had Whitaker Chronicle carved above the entrance. I had walked beneath those words thousands of times. That morning they felt like someone else's name. When I entered the newsroom, conversation stopped. Reporters looked up from their computers. Editors stepped back and pretended they hadn't been discussing me. One young photographer actually looked relieved. I raised one hand. For anyone who hasn't confirmed it yet, I am alive. A few people laughed. Nobody laughed for long. My son was waiting inside the glass conference room. Grant was 48 years old and had worked at the Chronicle since he was 23. He had my height, Eleanor's dark eyes and a habit of becoming extremely calm whenever everyone around him was angry. That habit had made him a good publisher. It also made me want to throw things at him. Two attorneys sat beside him. One represented Whitaker Publishing. The other represented Crescent. There was a folder in front of my usual chair. I did not sit. Start with the obituary. Grant folded his hands. We keep advance obituaries for prominent local people. You know that. I didn't know I was one of them. You have been one for 20 years. That is comforting. Grant ignored the sarcasm. The web team was preparing the ownership announcement. Your obituary had been updated because it contained background on the family and company. During the content migration, the draft was accidentally moved from private to scheduled. At 6:12 this morning. Yes. On the same day you're announcing the sale. Yes. Convenient accident. Embarrassing accident. Who wrote the last 3 lines? Grant looked at me. I did. I appreciated the honesty for approximately 1 second. Then I remembered what he had written. You wrote that I transferred control to you. You did. I most certainly did not. Grant slid the folder across the table. 11 months ago. I opened it. The document was mine. So was the signature. There was no forgery. 11 months earlier, I had signed a 5-year voting proxy granting Grant authority to exercise my shares in routine corporate matters. I remembered signing it. What I remembered differently was the conversation. Grant had told me he was tired of chasing me for signatures every time a vendor contract, refinancing document or board resolution needed approval. I was traveling then. Speaking at journalism schools. Writing a Sunday column. Enjoying the pleasant parts of being retired while still referring to myself as publisher whenever anyone asked. I signed the proxy. I did not read all 16 pages. That fact would become important. It would also become embarrassing. I closed the folder. A voting proxy does not let you sell the entire company. The Chronicle attorney spoke. The transaction is structured as a stock purchase, Mr. Whitaker. Don't use transaction language to make betrayal sound technical. Grant leaned forward. Dad, Crescent isn't stealing the paper. They're paying $14.6 million for it. I don't care if they're paying $50 million. That's easy to say when you haven't looked at the numbers in 4 years. The room went quiet. Grant pushed another folder toward me. Look. I did. Advertising revenue had fallen 37% in 5 years. Print subscriptions had declined again. Paper and distribution costs had risen. 2 expensive presses were approaching the end of their useful lives. The Chronicle had lost $1.3 million the previous year. We were projected to lose another $1.7 million this year. I looked at Grant. How much debt? $4.8 million. That number hurt more than the obituary. I thought it was less than 2. Grant could see it on my face. You didn't know? No. Because every time I tried to talk to you about it, you told me local newspapers had survived radio, television and the internet. They have. Some have. Many haven't. I turned another page. There was a loan with Grant's name beside it. $920,000. What is this? My money. You loaned the company $900,000? Over 3 years. Why didn't you tell me? I did. I stared at him. Grant smiled without humor. Apparently I should have put it in your obituary. I shut the folder. Who else approved the sale? Leah. That surprised me enough to make me sit down. My daughter had not worked at the Chronicle in 8 years. She owned shares, but she rarely attended meetings. She and Grant spoke only when family circumstances forced them to. And Leah had not voluntarily discussed the newspaper with me since the day she walked out of the newsroom carrying a cardboard box and told me she would rather lose her career than keep asking permission to do it honestly. Leah agreed to Crescent? She signed the letter of intent. Show me. Grant did. Her signature was there. The date was 5 months earlier. I called my daughter from the conference room. She answered on the 4th ring. Dad? Are you aware I'm dead? There was a silence. Then she laughed. Not a polite laugh. A full laugh. I am sorry, she said. I saw the screenshot. I was going to call, but I thought perhaps being declared dead might finally make you take a morning off. Did you sign a sale agreement with Crescent? Her laughter disappeared. I signed permission for Grant to explore the offer. I did not approve a final sale. He says you did. Then Grant is using the same definition of approval you used when I worked there. I felt my son's eyes on me. Can you come to Ridgeway? Why? Because apparently we're selling the newspaper. Are we? I am hoping not. Leah paused. Dad, before you turn Grant into the villain, look at the books. I have. All of them? I looked at Grant. What does that mean? Leah answered. It means I'll be there by 3. I spent the next 4 hours reading. The Chronicle was not dying. Dying would have been simpler. We still had 72,000 digital subscribers. Our investigations were routinely picked up statewide. Our high school sports coverage remained more popular than anything else we published. Our election guides reached nearly every household in the county. People still wanted the Chronicle. They simply did not want it in the same form that had paid our bills for most of my life. Digital revenue was growing. Print revenue was collapsing. And I had spent years refusing to reduce the print schedule because my father had printed 6 mornings a week, and his father had printed 6 mornings a week before him. Grant had proposed switching to 3 print editions. I rejected it. He proposed selling 1 press. I rejected it. He proposed converting the empty second floor into rental offices. I said the newsroom might need the space again. It had been empty for 9 years. A pattern emerged. Grant had been trying to change the newspaper. I had been trying to make time apologize and turn around. That did not excuse the sale. But it complicated my anger. At 2:30, a reporter named Maya Torres knocked on the conference room door. Maya was 27 and had joined the Chronicle less than a year earlier. She covered city government and possessed the unsettling ability to ask a question like she already knew the answer. Mr. Whitaker? Yes? Can I speak to you without Grant? Grant wasn't there. He had gone downstairs to deal with Crescent executives who had begun arriving for the afternoon announcement. "You are speaking to me without Grant." She closed the door. "Did Grant tell you 19 positions are marked for elimination?" I looked at her. "No." Maya placed 3 printed pages on the table. They came from Crescent's transition plan. 7 positions in printing. 4 in circulation. 3 copy editors. 2 photographers. 1 accounting employee. 2 advertising employees. 19. "Where did you get this?" "It was in a shared diligence folder the department heads were given access to yesterday." "Does Grant know?" "Yes." The anger came back. Much easier this time. Maya did not leave. "There is something else." Of course there was. In my experience, the phrase "something else" is responsible for half the disasters in family stories and nearly all investigative journalism. Maya handed me another page. It was Grant's employment agreement with Crescent. Regional President. 3-year contract. Base salary nearly twice what the Chronicle paid him. Equity incentives. And a $1.8 million retention payment if the acquisition closed before the end of the quarter. I reread that number. $1.8 million. Does the staff know this? No. Does Leah? I don't know. Why are you showing me? Maya hesitated. Because this morning the paper accidentally reported your death. By lunch, management was telling us not to discuss the sale. And we're supposed to be the people who ask everyone else what they're hiding. I stared at the transition plan. Maya turned to leave. "Ms. Torres." She stopped. "Thank you." She looked at me. "Don't thank me yet." "Why?" "Because if this becomes a story, I'm writing your part too." Then she left. Leah arrived at 3:20. My daughter was 45, wore her gray hair earlier than Eleanor had, and carried herself like someone who had spent 8 years building a life designed specifically not to require her father's approval. She had become an investigative editor for a non-profit newsroom in the state capital. She had won awards. I kept every article that mentioned them. She did not know that. We hugged. It was brief but real. Then she looked at the transition papers. "You found the layoffs?" "Yes." "And Grant's contract?" "Yes." She nodded. "Good." "You knew?" "I found out 6 weeks ago." "Why didn't you tell me?" Leah gave me a look I remembered from her teenage years. The look usually meant I had asked a question whose answer was going to annoy me. I did. "No, you didn't. I called you after I withdrew my support for the Crescent deal. I told you Grant was trying to force the sale through before the quarter ended. You told me you and Grant were fighting about the newspaper again." "No. That is what you decided I meant." I tried to remember the call. I had been on my way to lunch. Leah said Grant was rushing something. I told her to work it out with her brother because he was publisher now. Then I changed the subject to my grandson. I sat back. I didn't listen. "No." She did not soften the answer. That was one of the things I had missed about her. Grant entered. His expression changed when he saw the papers in front of me. "So Maya found the folder." "You sound remarkably calm about that. I assumed someone would." "You are being paid $1.8 million. If the sale closes, while 19 people lose their jobs." Grant looked at Leah. Did you tell him how many jobs disappear if the sale doesn't happen? Leah folded her arms. Go ahead. Grant turned to me. All of them. I shook my head. That's dramatic. No. Dramatic is pretending cash flow cares about family history. Grant opened the financial report. Our primary credit line renews in 34 days. The bank wants additional collateral or a reduction in debt. We have neither. Crescent eliminates 19 jobs, he continued. Without Crescent, we could eliminate 40 and still not solve the problem. So the retention payment is for saving everyone? Grant's eyes hardened. No. At least he didn't pretend. The retention payment is for me. I negotiated it. I spent 11 years running a business everyone in this family likes to describe as a public institution whenever they want me to accept less money. You own 30% of the company. Which is worth very little if the company goes bankrupt. You had the payment. From the staff, yes. It is in the board materials. I did not receive board materials. You told me not to send them because you were retired. There are moments in arguments when you realize the other person has been saving receipts. Grant had 11 years of them. Leah sat beside me. Grant, I understand why you want out. Do you? Yes. I also understand why a $1.8 million payment means you should not be the only person deciding which option is responsible. Grant laughed. And what's your option? Leah placed a blue binder on the table. This. Grant looked at the binder and closed his eyes. You're still pushing that? Yes. What is it? I asked. Neither answered immediately. That annoyed me. Can someone in this family please stop having entire conversations I'm not part of? Leah opened the binder. For the previous 18 months, she had been working with a group of local foundations, journalism donors, university partners and community investors on a non-profit conversion plan. The idea was complicated. The Whitaker family would surrender controlling ownership. A non-profit public benefit organization would acquire the Chronicle's newsroom and digital operations. An independent board would govern it. No Whitaker would control editorial appointments. The print operation would be reduced. 3 editions a week instead of 6. Some positions would still disappear. 7, according to the plan. Not 19. The old building would be sold and leased back for 5 years. The sale proceeds would reduce debt. Donors had tentatively committed $6.4 million if the family contributed enough shares to establish independent control. I turned pages slowly. Why have I never seen this? Leah and Grant looked at each other. Grant answered. Because I knew you would hate it. Why? Because the first thing it requires is removing Whitaker from control. It is our newspaper. Leah nodded. Exactly. I looked at her. What is that supposed to mean? It means we keep saying the Chronicle belongs to Ridgway until the moment Ridgway asks for a vote. I closed the binder. No. Grant leaned back. There it is. This family spent 83 years building the Chronicle. Leah answered. And 4 generations of reporters, printers, photographers, delivery drivers and readers spent 83 years making it worth building. That does not mean we give it away. Then let Grant sell it. I looked at her. You don't mean that. I do. If your only acceptable future is one where a Whitaker stays in control, Crescent is the more honest option. That sentence irritated me so much I knew I needed time before answering it. I left the conference room. Instead of going home, I went upstairs to the archive. The archive was my favorite room in the building. Bound editions of the Chronicle lined the walls from floor to ceiling. Old photographs sat in labeled boxes. Microfilm machines nobody under 40 knew how to operate gathered dust near the back. Eleanor had loved that room too. My wife spent 35 years at the newspaper. Officially, she was managing editor for 11 of them. Unofficially, she was the person who prevented both her husband and children from mistaking strong opinions for management skills. Eleanor died 3 years earlier. Cancer took her slowly enough for us to say goodbye and quickly enough that none of us believed we had finished. After she died, Grant became more controlling. Leah became more distant. I became more nostalgic. We each found a way to grieve that annoyed the other two. On a shelf near Eleanor's old desk sat a box labeled Advance Obituaries. I laughed despite myself. Of course I opened it. There were files for former mayors, judges, business owners and other people the Chronicle did not want to begin researching from scratch on the day they died. My file was there. The first draft had been written by Eleanor 13 years earlier. I recognized her writing before I found her initials. Eleanor had written, "Samuel Whitaker never believed newspapers were businesses in the ordinary sense. He believed they were promises printed on cheap paper." That sounded like her. Then I reached a paragraph that had never appeared online that morning. His greatest strength was believing the Chronicle could survive anything. His greatest weakness was believing survival proved him right. I sat at Eleanor's desk. For several minutes, I did not move. Then I found a yellow sticky note attached to the final page. It was dated 8 years earlier. The year Leah left the Chronicle. Eleanor had written, "Do not update ending until Samuel and Leah settle the Bellwether story." My stomach tightened. I had spent 8 years avoiding the Bellwether story. Apparently my wife had planned to put it in my obituary. Bellwether Health was once the Chronicle's largest advertiser. It operated clinics, urgent care facilities and 2 hospitals across the region. 8 years earlier, Leah spent 6 months investigating how Bellwether handled contracts tied to a publicly funded expansion. Her reporting found questionable billing, undisclosed relationships and internal warnings that executives had ignored. It was excellent reporting. I knew it then. 2 days before publication, Bellwether's chief executive asked to see me. He did not threaten to sue. He did something more effective. He showed me what Bellwether spent with the Chronicle every year. $900,000. Then he told me that if Leah's story ran before their lawyers had time to review every allegation, Bellwether would move its advertising elsewhere. I told myself I wasn't killing the story. I was delaying it. I asked Leah for 2 more weeks. Bellwether asked for corrections. Then more documents. Then another meeting. 2 weeks became 6. 6 became 10. Leah accused me of protecting an advertiser. I accused her of becoming emotionally attached to her investigation. She resigned. 4 months later, a statewide newspaper published its own investigation. Many of Leah's findings were confirmed. Bellwether's advertising left us anyway. I never apologized. I told myself there was nothing useful to apologize for after the damage was done. That was not maturity. It was pride with better vocabulary. I was still sitting with Eleanor's obituary when Grant found me. He saw the file. "You found Mom's version. You knew about this?" "Yes." "Did Leah?" "I don't think so. I tapped the sticky note. Your mother thought the bellwether story belonged in my obituary. Gran sat across from me. She was angry with you for years. I know. No. I don't think you do. He stared toward the bound newspapers. Mom told me once that the worst thing about bellwether wasn't that you made the wrong call. It was that you kept insisting there hadn't been a call. I said nothing. Grant continued. You always said the Chronicle had responsibilities bigger than any one story. Payroll. Pensions. Keeping the newsroom open. And now you're using the same argument. Yes. He did not hesitate. That was the rehook I had not expected. My son had not learned to betray the newspaper in spite of me. Part of him had learned it from me. You think selling to Crescent is the same as delaying one investigation? No. I think both decisions begin with a person convincing himself he is protecting everyone else. Then why hide the sale? Grant looked tired. Not angry. Tired. Because you wouldn't have heard the numbers. You didn't give me a chance. I gave you 11 years. That hurt. He continued. When I wanted digital subscriptions, you said people wouldn't pay for a website. When I wanted to reduce print, you said older readers would leave. When I wanted to sell the presses, you said my grandfather would turn in his grave. When I put $900,000 of my own money into the paper, you wrote a column about how family ownership protects local journalism. I looked away. Grant's voice softened. Dad, do you know what it is like to be responsible for a company whose founder can veto every difficult choice but doesn't have to make payroll on Friday? I wanted to defend myself. I had 47 years of arguments available. Instead, I asked, why Crescent? Because they have money. Because they take the debt. Because they keep the Chronicle operating. Because I sleep through the night for the first time in a decade. And because of $1.8 million. Grant met my eyes. Yes. He looked ashamed. But he did not remove the money from the answer. I respected that more than I wanted to. The Crescent announcement was cancelled that afternoon. Not the sale. Only the announcement. Too many employees knew about the layoffs. Too many screenshots of my obituary were circulating. And Crescent's public relations director had apparently decided that announcing an acquisition on the same day the seller accidentally declared his living father dead created the wrong tone. For the first time all day, I agreed with Crescent. The next morning, Grant called an all-staff meeting. 56 employees gathered in the newsroom. Remote staff joined on screens. Grant stood in front. I sat in the back beside Leah. That was unusual. For most of my life, if there was a room and an audience, I found the front of it. Grant told the staff everything. The debt. The losses. The Crescent offer. The 19 jobs. His employment contract. His retention payment. Nobody interrupted until he finished. Then Janet Price stood. Janet had worked in copy editing for 29 years. Am I one of the 19? Grant looked at her. Yes. Janet nodded once. Thank you for finally saying it to my face. She sat down. A printer named Curtis asked. If Crescent is the only way to survive, why did Leah reject it? Grant looked toward his sister. Leah stood. Because I don't think it's the only way. She explained the nonprofit plan. She did not oversell it. That mattered. She told them 7 jobs would likely disappear. Print would be reduced. Some salaries might freeze for a year. The building would probably be sold. The paper would need donor funding, reader memberships and strict rules separating donors from editorial decisions. It could fail. She said that too. Maya raised her hand. Who controls it? Not us, Leah said. She pointed toward herself, Grant and me. An independent board. Curtis laughed. So the Whitakers finally get laid off too? The room laughed. Even Grant smiled. Then Maya asked, Mr. Whitaker, do you support it? Every face turned toward me. I could have lied. I could have said I needed more information. I could have praised everyone and promised careful consideration. I had been publishing diplomatic sentences for nearly 50 years. Instead, I said, no. Leah looked down. Grant looked unsurprised. I continued. I don't support it yet. And I am beginning to understand that the word yet is something I should have used more often in my life. Nobody laughed. But they listened. After the meeting, Maya stopped me. May I ask you something on the record? No. Off the record? No. As your employee? I sighed. Go ahead. Why does keeping the Whitaker family in control matter more than keeping 19 people employed? It doesn't. Then why is control the part you're struggling with? I looked at her. You really are a reporter. That is what it says on my badge. I did not answer her question. But it came home with me. That night, I sat alone at my dining table with the non-profit proposal and Crescent's purchase agreement. One represented certainty. Crescent would pay the debt. 19 people would lose their jobs. The remaining staff would keep working. Grant would become wealthy. The Whitaker family would be finished as newspaper owners. The other represented risk. 7 likely job losses. Millions in donor commitments that were not guaranteed until conditions were satisfied. A smaller print product. No family control. Either way, I lost the newspaper I knew. That was the part I had not wanted to admit. There was no choice where the Chronicle returned to 1998 and everyone congratulated me for preserving it. That newspaper was already gone. Around 11, Leah came to my house. She brought 2 coffees. One was decaffeinated. I am 74, not 94. You once drank coffee at 11 at night and wrote a 6,000-word column about parking meters. I'm protecting the public. I laughed. Then we sat. For a few minutes, we did not discuss the paper. Then I told her about Eleanor's obituary. The original one. I told her about the sticky note mentioning Bellwether. Leah stared at her coffee. Mom never told me. She wanted us to settle it. We didn't. No. I looked at my daughter. I was wrong. She did not immediately forgive me. I was grateful. Easy forgiveness would have made the apology feel like a transaction. Leah asked. About what? The Bellwether story. I told myself I was protecting 50 employees. I told myself delaying publication was responsible. But the truth is I was afraid. Of losing the advertising? Yes. And? There was always in and with Leah. Of you being right. She looked up. I continued. You were 37. You had built the investigation without me. You knew the sources better. You understood the documents better. And when Bellwether challenged it, they came to me. The older man. The publisher. The person they expected to control you. And you did. Yes. Leah's eyes filled. Mine did too. I needed you to say that 8 years ago. I know. No. You know now. She wiped her eyes. 8 years ago, you needed me to be difficult because admitting I was right meant admitting you had used the newspaper's survival as an excuse. Yes. She nodded. Grant is doing the same thing. Yes. And so are you. I frowned. How? You're pretending this is about whether Grant has the right to sell. It isn't. The sale can still be stopped. Your proxy is revocable. You checked? Of course I checked. She leaned forward. The real question is what happens the morning after you stop it. There it was. The part anger had allowed me to avoid. Stopping Grant would feel like winning. It would not make payroll. The following morning, I revoked the voting proxy. I did it with Grant sitting across from me. He did not argue. That worried me more than anger would have. When the document was signed, he said, "Congratulations." On what? You are in charge again. Temporarily. Grant almost smiled. You have been temporarily in charge since 1979. Sit down. He sat. I am not killing Crescent today. Grant looked surprised. Why not? Because Leah's plan is not real until the money is real. And Crescent is not acceptable until everyone understands what it means. So what are you doing? Something I should have done months ago. What? Letting other people into the decision. Grant laughed once. Who are you and what did you do with my father? He died Tuesday. For the first time since the obituary went online, Grant laughed with me. We created a transition committee. 2 newsroom employees. 1 printing employee. 1 circulation representative. 1 community member. 1 independent financial advisor. Grant. Leah. And me. 3 Whitakers out of 9. Grant thought it was irresponsible. I thought it was terrifying. Leah thought both reactions were encouraging. For 9 days, we worked. Crescent increased its offer slightly and guaranteed no additional layoffs for 18 months. The guarantee ended after 18 months. The nonprofit group converted $5 million of tentative support into binding commitments if several conditions were met. The family had to donate most of its voting interest. The Chronicle had to sell the building. Print publication had to decrease. A community membership campaign had to raise $750,000 in 60 days. The lender also had to extend the credit line. Nothing about it was guaranteed. Then Maya found something else. This time she called Grant first. That mattered. He brought the document to the committee himself. It was a Crescent internal forecast. Year 1. Integrate advertising and payroll. Year 2. Consolidate copy editing and design. Year 3. Evaluate conversion of Ridgeway Chronicle into regional digital edition with limited local staffing. The committee read the final line twice. Janet, the copy editor, asked Grant. Did you see this before you signed? Grant looked at the document. Yes. Nobody spoke. I felt anger rise again. Grant stopped me before I could use it. I read it. Crescent told me it was scenario planning, not a decision. I chose to believe them. Janet asked. Because you trusted them? Grant stared at the table. No. Then why? Grant looked around the room. Because I wanted to be finished. The sentence landed harder than any excuse. He continued. I wanted the debt gone. I wanted the weekly calls from the lender gone. I wanted to stop calculating how many people we could afford to employ every time a major advertiser left. I wanted someone else to own the problem. And yes, I wanted the money. Grant looked at me. I told myself Crescent might close the local newsroom in 3 years. Without Crescent, I wasn't sure we'd survive 3 months. Leah asked quietly. Why didn't you tell us that? Because exhausted doesn't sound like leadership. For years, I had believed my son wanted my chair. I had never considered the possibility that he had spent 11 years trying to escape it. The committee voted 8-1 to reject Crescent. The one vote in favor came from Grant. He did not apologize for it. I did not ask him to. Then came the harder vote. The non-profit conversion. 6 voted yes. 2 voted no. 1 abstained. The abstention was mine. Leah found me afterward. You couldn't do it. I didn't vote against it. That is an incredibly father answer. I smiled. I am working on myself. Work faster. The lender gave us 30 days. Then the Chronicle did something I had resisted for most of my career. It wrote about itself. Not a public relations announcement. A story. Maya and an editor from outside the company produced it. They interviewed Grant, Leah, employees, the non-profit funders, Crescent, and me. Maya asked about Bellwether. For a moment, I considered telling her it had nothing to do with the current story. Then I heard Eleanor's sentence in my head. Survival had spent too many years being my evidence that I was right. So I told Maya the truth. I told her I delayed Leah's investigation because I was afraid of losing advertising revenue. I told her the story was later confirmed elsewhere. I told her I never apologized. When the article appeared, the headline was not about Crescent. It read, "Who owns a local newspaper when the family can no longer save it?" My confession was 12 paragraphs in. I hated seeing it. That was how I knew it belonged there. The community membership campaign launched the following morning. I expected loyalty. What we received was criticism with credit cards. People subscribed and complained. They donated and demanded better school board coverage. They pledged money and asked why we had stopped reviewing local restaurants. One retired teacher contributed $25 and attached a note saying, "Your editorial page has been wrong since 1987, but the town still needs you." I framed that one. In 22 days, the campaign reached $750,000. Then passed $800,000. The lender extended the credit line. The building was sold to a local redevelopment group that agreed to lease 2 floors back to the Chronicle while converting the rest into offices and apartments. 1 printing press was sold. 6-day print became Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. 7 positions were eliminated. 7 people. I refused to reduce that sentence to the word restructuring. The nonprofit plan saved more jobs than Crescent would have. It did not save everyone. We provided severance and job placement assistance. Some found new work quickly. Some did not. Success looks cleaner in newspaper headlines than it does when you know everyone's name. The final transfer happened 4 months after my accidental obituary. Whitaker Publishing ceased to control the Ridgeway Chronicle. A new organization took its place. The Ridgeway Public News Trust. 11 directors sat on the board. Educators. Business owners. A retired judge. 2 newsroom representatives. A librarian. A community college student. And 1 seat reserved for a member of the Whitaker family for the first 5 years. Everyone assumed I would take it. I did not. Neither did Grant. Leah accepted it for 1 year. Then she said the family had contributed enough opinions for 1 century. Grant stayed through the transition. He did not become president of Crescent. He did not receive $1.8 million. The nonprofit board offered him the permanent publisher position. He declined. That surprised me. Why? Grant looked around his office. Because for the first time in 25 years, I can leave without feeling like the Chronicle dies if I do. Where will you go? I don't know. That frightened him. I could tell. But there was relief underneath it. He eventually accepted a job helping several small newspapers combine printing and distribution operations while keeping separate newsrooms. He says he enjoys solving problems that do not come with a portrait of his grandfather hanging above the desk. Leah did not return to the Chronicle permanently. That was another lesson for me. For months, I imagined the perfect ending involved my daughter coming home. But Ridgeway was my home. It did not have to become hers again to prove she forgave me. She remained at her nonprofit newsroom. She visited more. We spoke every Sunday. Sometimes we discussed journalism. Sometimes she ordered me not to discuss journalism. Both were progress. Grant and Leah took longer. Their arguments had layers mine did not. Grant believed Leah left him alone with a failing business. Leah believed Grant used her departure to become exactly the kind of publisher she had been fighting. Both were partly right. That made forgiveness harder. 6 months after the conversion, Grant attended one of Leah's investigative journalism panels at the university. He sat in the last row. He did not tell her he was coming. Afterward, he waited until everyone left. Then he said, "You were right about Dad?" Leah answered, "That is not exactly an apology to me." Grant nodded. "I know." Then he tried again. "I used the fact that you left to justify never asking why you left." Leah told me later that was the first useful sentence her brother had said to her in 8 years. She did not hug him. They got coffee. I have learned not to underestimate coffee. My relationship with Grant changed too. For months, I wanted to ask whether he regretted the Crescent deal. I resisted because the question really meant, "Do you admit I was right to stop you?" Eventually, he answered without being asked. We were sitting on my porch when he said, "I still think Crescent was rational." That sounds promising. I didn't say good. I said rational. What is the difference? Grant thought about it. Rational means I can show you a spreadsheet that explains why I did it. Good means I would still do it after everyone affected had seen the spreadsheet. I looked at him. That is annoyingly wise. I had good parents. I laughed. You had one. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We were both thinking about Eleanor. 1 year after the Obituary incident, the Chronicle asked me to visit the newsroom. Not as owner. Not as publisher. As a guest. The receptionist handed me a visitor badge. I stared at it. She looked nervous. "Mr. Whitaker, I can call upstairs if you don't need to wear one." "No. I need to wear it." I clipped it to my jacket. The newsroom looked different. Smaller. Busier. Younger. There were fewer desks and more screens. The giant page layout boards were gone. The old afternoon editorial meeting had been replaced with 2 shorter meetings because apparently nobody younger than 40 believed suffering together for 90 minutes was a sign of professionalism. I approved. Mostly. Maya was now city editor. She showed me the latest subscriber numbers. Digital membership had increased 18%. The reduced print schedule was profitable for the first time in years. Donations were stable. The Chronicle had opened a small bureau in the northern part of the county, something we had discussed for 2 decades and never funded. "Are you here to write the anniversary column?" Maya asked. "What anniversary?" "Your death." I stared at her. She smiled. "Too soon?" "It has been a year." Then exactly on time. The Chronicle had asked me to write about what had happened. I agreed under one condition. Maya had final editing authority. She looked suspicious. "You won't call me at midnight to restore paragraphs?" "I reserve the right to complain. Everyone has that right." "Then we have a deal." Before writing the column, I went upstairs to the archive. The box of advance obituaries was still there. So was mine. Grant's version had been printed and added to the file. The accidental one. The one that said I'd transferred control to my son. Beneath it was Eleanor's older version. I read her sentence again. "His greatest strength was believing the Chronicle could survive anything. His greatest weakness was believing survival proved him right." This time, I smiled. Then I took out a pen. There was empty space at the bottom. I wrote. "He spent most of his life believing he inherited a newspaper. He learned late that he had only been trusted with one." I put the obituary back in the box. Then I changed my mind. I carried it downstairs. Maya looked at the page. "What is this?" "My obituary." "Should I be concerned?" "No. But next time you publish it, please confirm one thing first." "That you're dead?" "That would be a start." She laughed. The anniversary column ran that Sunday. I wrote about Grant, Leah, Crescent, Eleanor, Bellwether. I wrote about the 7 people who lost jobs during the conversion and the 19 who would likely have lost them under Crescent. I wrote about the readers who gave $25 and the foundations that gave millions. I wrote about what it felt like to walk into my family's newspaper wearing a visitor badge. And I wrote something I would never have written 2 years earlier. The Chronicle became safer the day my family lost the power to save it alone. Grant called after reading it. "You stole that line from Mom." I improved it. "You definitely stole it from Mom." Leah called 10 minutes later. "Good column." "Only good?" Maya cut the boring parts. I smiled. "Your mother would have liked her." "Yes, Then Leah added. And she would have hated that sentence. Which one? Your mother would have liked her. I understood. We had spent years using Eleanor's imagined approval to strengthen our own arguments. You're right, I said. I like Maya much better. That may sound like a small correction. Families are mostly repaired through small corrections. The dramatic moments expose what is broken. The ordinary ones determine whether anything changes. I still own a framed copy of the Chronicle from the morning after the non-profit conversion became official. For 83 years, the masthead included a line. Published independently by the Whittaker family. That morning, it was gone. In its place, a non-profit newsroom serving Ridgeway County. The first time I saw it, something inside me hurt. I wish I could tell you I immediately felt noble and liberated. I did not. I felt erased. Then I turned the page. There was a City Hall investigation by Maya's team. A photograph from the high school championship. A story about a family restaurant reopening after a fire. A voter guide. 3 letters complaining about property taxes. The Chronicle was still there. My name wasn't required. That was the final lesson my accidental obituary gave me. Most people imagine an obituary is about what remains after a person is gone. Mine taught me what could remain after I stopped insisting on being at the center of it. My son should not have hidden the crescent sale. He should not have used my proxy to force through a decision he knew I did not understand. He should have told the staff about the layoffs. He should have disclosed what Crescent was offering him before asking anyone to trust his recommendation. But Grant's betrayal did not appear out of nowhere. He had spent years watching his father use survival to justify control. When his turn came, he used survival to justify secrecy. Leah had tried to tell both of us that a newspaper cannot demand transparency from everyone in town while practicing something different inside its own walls. It took me 8 years to hear her. And Eleanor? She had understood the problem before any of us. She wrote it in an obituary 13 years before I needed to read it. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if the draft had not accidentally gone online that Tuesday morning. Maybe Crescent would own the Chronicle now. Maybe Grant would be a regional president. Maybe I would still be telling people retirement suited me while quietly holding enough voting power to prevent everyone else from changing anything. Maybe Leah would still call every few weeks. Maybe my children would still speak mostly through lawyers and board agendas. Instead, a web editor clicked the wrong setting. My obituary went live. A neighbor called to ask whether I was dead. And for one humiliating morning, I had the unusual privilege of reading what my family had decided my ending would be before I was finished living it. Grant wrote that I had transferred the Chronicle to the next generation. He was wrong. In the end, none of us got it. Not Grant. Not Leah. Not me. We gave it to people whose names would never appear above the door. And that may be the first decision the Whittaker family made about the Chronicle that Eleanor would not have needed to edit.